This is actually a very short video about the kind of fundamentals of positioning, and hopefully you'll get some sense for why I get frustrated by the way that it's often done within pharma. So I want you to think about two things. One is the word framing. So when you frame something, you provide someone with a way of helping them see what it is that you're about to provide them. And then think about two other words, which is passive and active. Passive positioning is what happens if you just take your data, summarize it, show it to someone, and then they make their own minds up about how they're going to use that product. That passive approach is what happens if that's all you do, right? Or if your positioning isn't very good, you end up with this passive positioning, which by definition almost isn't positioning. It's just this kind of natural place that the product lands if you don't do anything active to support it. And think about that other word, active. Actively framing people's expectation of your drug means making a decision about how to help them see it. It's not the same as the passive positioning. The passive positioning is what you get as a default if you just take the data that you have. Active means helping them see it differently, framing it differently, giving them a different stereotype, a different way of seeing it. Stereotype tends to apply to the way that most passive positioning is done. And passive positioning is done not by accident, but by design. And it's done by design because of the way that most people think that you can market research your way to a positioning. So I want you to think about this the way that I think about this. If you develop a profile for your drug, you develop the TPP, and then you show it to someone. Guess what happens? You've told them what the drug is. You probably told them, you've given them a mechanism. So you've called it TKI, and you've given them an indication that you've studied it in, or are planning to study it in. And then you've given them a set of endpoints and outcomes and comparators and all those other things that you're planning to put into your profile. And then you show it to them. Well, guess what happens? You've just literally stereotyped your drug by everything that they currently understand about that class, that indication, those comparators, those endpoints. Once you've done that, you've framed your drug in such a way that it's very difficult to shift them into a different way of seeing it. You've engaged their rational brain, and now you're going to ask them to think differently about where they would position that drug. The other things that you've done are probably, your market research agency has probably also chosen the specialists who you're going to ask to tell you about this drug, probably from one therapeutic area. You probably also asked them to consider that drug versus the current marketed product landscape. Not the future landscape, but the current product landscape. So you've chosen an indication, you've chosen a set of specialists, and you've chosen the current competitor set. And you've then shown them what you're expecting to study with the drug. All of this relies on their passive engagement, and what you get back is typically second line, third line, I'll use it after the other drugs that I've got, or if it's 10% better than this other one, I might use it in this place. So you arrive at what typically is called this kind of quantitative differentiation. So if only I could have this product that I really like, but 10% better, then I'm great, I'm all in. And then you're looking at sensitivity to try and decide, well, how much do I need to be able to see before I'm going to move my perception. So once you've done that, your agency then comes back and they do a therefore. Well, the therefore tends to bound it by where those specialists who you've chosen, by definition, see your product fitting passively. You may as well not do any of that, just take the data out at the time of launch and give them the data. Because that's all you've done in the market research, that's all that your positioning could ever therefore expect to end up talking about. You can put nice words in it, you can put in a template, you can put a nice campaign around it, but all you've done is reflected what would happen if you just take the data out at the time of launch and say nice things about it. If you want people to think about it actively, to have an active framing of your drug that's not the passive one, which is really what positioning is all about, creating a space in the mind of your customer that isn't just that passive positioning. But you can't show them the profile first. Now this seems so self-evident to me, so obvious, but it's the way that most market research goes. They show them the product profile and then they ask them to think differently about it. You can't do that. As soon as you show them this, you frame them. Good luck trying to get them out of that framing. Show them the ideas first, and then the profile, and then you can understand whether the profile matches where they were able to go in terms of their imagination. And if you think about it the way that we think about it, you end up with this sort of view that I'm going to try and show you this, but you think about your product. This is the data that you have. This is the data that you might get by launch, but actually the direction that you could go in, it's phenomenal, right? You could go all sorts of other places, but actually what people tend to do is they take this first frame and then they ask people to think about it. Well, you could take the product anywhere you want to, and certainly in terms of belief about where it fits. Then you're giving it an active framing, and then people can provide their own imagination. So, because they're not bounded by what they think that the product might do. So, let's say that you took a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug and you said to people, this is now a cure for Alzheimer's. Well, of course, they're going to struggle to get the idea of a non-steroidal curing Alzheimer's out of their imagination. If you told them this is a cure for Alzheimer's and then somehow come back to what the mechanism is, well, we might end up wanting to describe the mechanism differently. We might end up wanting to do a whole bunch of things differently. But as soon as you frame them by saying, look, this product is one of these, but we want you to believe that it can do this, or that it's somehow transformatively better than the competition, well, good luck, because you can't do that. And to do that as a fundamental part of your approach tells you why you can't market research your way to a positioning. It's because most agencies think that they can understand unmet needs by showing people a product profile. Short answer is you can't. Short answer is we want you to think about the idea of active versus passive positioning. Passive positioning isn't really positioning, it's telling, it's describing. Active positioning is really that choice of being something different than you'd get by default. And to do that, you need to think differently about it. You need to frame the expectations of your drug in a way that people do not expect. So you can't derive it from their rational responses to a product profile, given who they are, given that they're specialists in a particular therapeutic area, given that they are respondents to a piece of market research and all the other fundamental problems of that research. So, short fundamentals of the way that we think about positioning. Just remember those words, active versus passive. That matters, because passive positioning isn't positioning. Active positioning is real positioning. So do not be convinced by the agencies that you have to do it that way around. You do not. Most of the successful positionings haven't worked that way. They have presented a product idea to someone before they've then gone on to show them the TPP, and the TPPs are typically pretty awful anyway. So we'll get on to conversations about qualitative versus quantitative differentiation. The other thing I want you to bear in mind, though, is the other two words that really count here: efficacy and safety. Efficacy is a word we hear all the time. You'd expect to hear it because it's shorthand for what our products do. It's not the way that you do positioning. You cannot use the word efficacy in your positioning. You also can't use the word safety in the positioning. And the reason is very simple. Let's say you took, say, an Alzheimer's drug. Well, what's the efficacy of an Alzheimer's drug? Is it to prevent disease? Is it to slow progression? Is it to manage symptoms? Is it to manage cognition or behavior? Which efficacy are you describing? So if you say to me, my product has efficacy, I don't know what you're talking about. I need you to tell me something more about the dimensions that matter. Let's say the product is toxic. Let's say the product is inconvenient. Let's say the product has injection site reactions. Well, are all of those safety? No, they unpack, and that's important when it gets to the conversation around positioning. So efficacy unpacks into the things that it might do differently. Safety unpacks into the things that it might do differently. So if your research agency comes back and says that people just want more efficacy, well, what are they talking about? You need to describe the efficacy parameters that matter to the physician, that matter to the patient, that matter to the payer, because that's really where the sweet spot of positioning is to try and understand, well, which efficacy are we going to talk about? The good news is if all of your competition's just using the word efficacy and you come in with something specific, well, that's a real sweet spot. But if someone just comes in and all they've talked about, or they stopped listening when someone said, oh, if you can just give me more efficacy and a bit more safety, or just balance the two, and they stop talking, we've got nothing. What we have to have is a way of understanding which of the efficacy parameters mattered, because then we can get into this active place where you've described something that your product does that no one else does. That is qualitative, active positioning, and that's the sweet spot. So won't dwell on that too much, but do consider active versus passive positioning, qualitative versus quantitative positioning, and ban, I guarantee you, ban the word efficacy, ban the word safety, because they are not helpful. And if any agency shows you those words on a slide and say this is what people want more of, I hope that you know what to do with them. Okay, thanks. We'll cover some of these subjects in a couple more videos time. Thank you.